In this lesson, you will learn what it means when a dog is reactive, some methods for working with reactive dogs, what it means when a dog is aggressive and why you should not accept aggressive dogs as clients, what a trigger is and what over threshold means. A dog-aggressive dog, as we define it here, is a dog that has caused physical harm to another dog. I do not recommend taking on dogs that are dog-aggressive because if a dog has caused physical harm to another dog, it is not a far leap for a dog to be aggressive towards a person. This is especially the case in a pet sitting situation where there might be other stresses and triggers, such as an altered routine and new people coming into the home, which can bring the dog closer or even over threshold. People-aggressive dogs, as we define them here, are dogs that have caused physical harm to a person. If the client tells you a dog has ever been aggressive towards a person, again, I do not recommend taking on that client. It's better to be safe than sorry. Do not put yourself in a situation where you may be hurt. I recommend screening for aggression issues during the initial sales call rather than waiting for the meet and greet to talk about these issues. If a client mentions their dog has aggression issues, I refer those clients to a local Karen Pryor certified training partner or an animal behaviorist who I trust. I would much rather recommend the dog gets the help and rehabilitation they need rather than put myself or a sitter in danger by caring for an aggressive dog. Warning: dog attacks are serious and can cause permanent damage and disfiguration to your face, limbs, hands, and body. Take dog aggression seriously. Let's define what I mean by a reactive dog. A reactive dog may bark, become stressed, fearful, or overly excited at the sight of or proximity to a trigger. Reactive dogs become over threshold more easily than other dogs. Reactivity can be thought of as a spectrum. Some dogs are very reactive to certain triggers and may become over threshold very easily in the presence of only one trigger. A dog on the other side of the reactivity spectrum might only become over threshold when many triggers occur at the same time. It's important to note that reactive dogs, as we're defining them here, have never caused physical harm or damage to another dog, and also have never shown aggression towards a human. Caring for reactive dogs is rather common in the pet sitting field. Reactive dogs tend to not do well at the kennel or at doggy daycare because of the many triggers present at those facilities. So, clients with reactive dogs tend to look for private dog walkers or pet sitters to care for their dog. Since it is common for professional pet sitters and dog walkers to work with reactive dogs, let's take a few moments and cover what a trigger is and what is meant by over threshold. If you talk with an animal behaviorist, they will have more complex definitions of stress, arousal, triggers, and threshold than what we are going to cover here. And if you want to become an animal behaviorist, you're going to need to know all of those definitions and how they interact with one another. But for professional pet sitting and dog walking, we can keep it a little bit more simple. So, for this course, we are going to cover the basics of what you need to know to manage triggers and how to prevent a dog from becoming over threshold so you can keep the pets in your care safe and stress-free. First, let's define triggers in the context of professional pet sitting and dog walking. Here, we are defining a trigger as anything in the dog's environment which will cause the dog to feel stress, pain, or fear. Some common triggers are a dog barking, unfamiliar people, other dogs, familiar or unfamiliar, wild animals, loud noises such as fire alarms, horns, or construction, traffic, certain smells like smoke or alcohol, people with hats, beards, or hoods, bikes or skateboards, certain events or experiences such as fireworks displays, going to the vet, an altered routine, busy areas, walking routes on which the dog had a bad experience. Again, it's important to note not every dog will be triggered by the same things. Some dogs will be very easily triggered when exposed to just a single trigger, and other dogs may not be triggered at all, even when experiencing many triggers all at once. Now that you know what a trigger is, let's take a look at how triggers can interact with one another. When there are multiple triggers present in a dog's environment, the triggers are said to stack up. And if there are too many triggers stacking up, they can cause a dog to become over threshold. To explain how trigger stacking works, I like to use the tea kettle analogy. Imagine a tea kettle, or just look at the tea kettle in this video. Now imagine each trigger as a candle. When the trigger is in your dog's environment, it's like placing a candle under the kettle. If there is just one candle, it would take a while for the water in the kettle to boil over. Just like for some dogs, if there's only one trigger, they may be able to cope with it and not show signs of stress or fear. But as the dog is exposed to multiple triggers over time, it's like adding more candles under the kettle. So the water heats up faster. Eventually, if there are too many candles under the tea kettle, the water boils over. Similar to how a dog might become over threshold in a stressful environment with too many triggers. It's important to note that all of the triggers do not need to be happening at one time to cause a dog to go over threshold. When a dog is exposed to a trigger, it activates a hormonal and neurological response that can last for at least 24 hours following a stressful event. So trigger stacking can occur over a period of hours or even days. The goal should be to avoid triggers altogether. Be on the lookout so you can avoid triggers that may stack up and cause the dog in your care to go over threshold. When working with dog reactive dogs, you can usually just avoid other dogs and other triggers by adding distance between the dog and the trigger. For a dog, distance from the trigger means safety, because in the dog's mind, when a trigger is farther away, it poses less of a threat. My mantra when I'm walking a client's dog is avoid, avoid, avoid. Avoid all problems. I'm always on the lookout for potential triggers and problems while out for a walk. If I see anything that could possibly be a trigger for a dog, I just try to get as far from the trigger as possible. This might mean walking across the street, if possible, or walking back the way I came and finding an alternative route. In cases where I absolutely must walk past the trigger with the dog and there is no other option, I will try to distract the dog with a tasty treat. I'll speed up our walk and jog past the trigger. I'll also try to get the dog to focus on me rather than the trigger. If approved by your client or the owner of your company, one of the best ways to help a dog that easily becomes over threshold is to train eye contact by using a clicker and a reward. When a dog reaches threshold, they are no longer able to cope with the stresses in their environment. They often reach a fight, flight, or freeze state. A dog that is over threshold may be panting heavily, yawning, have an increased heart rate. They may be barking and lunging, and they're often not able to focus. When a dog becomes over threshold, their prefrontal cortex, where higher level processing and thoughts occur, becomes overloaded, and the dog is no longer able to make rational decisions or learn. It is not possible to train a dog while they're in an over threshold state. As a dog walker or pet sitter, it should always be your goal not to get a dog into a situation where they might become over threshold. But if you do encounter this situation, try to add distance between you and the trigger. Distract the dog and try to jog away from the trigger. Even after a dog has come back down below threshold, you may want to cut the walk short and go back to the client's home and try to calm them down. As always, if you need to cut a walk short, you should always let the client know and be transparent about what happened during your visit. So, what causes these reactivity issues in the first place? Many times, reactivity issues are caused by improper training that uses fear or pain. That's why we at Certified Pet Expert advocate for no use of training that involves fear or pain, and we advocate for no use of pinch collars, electronic shock collars, or other training tools or collars that cause pain. We also believe, as a certified professional dog walker or pet sitter, it's important to understand how these collars and any training tool that uses pain can lead to aggressive or otherwise negative tendencies. Dogs do not problem solve in the same way we do. A dog's prefrontal cortex is much smaller than a human's, meaning a dog's mind has less computational power. An example of this would be when a dog wraps their leash around a pole, and no matter how hard the dog tries, they can't quite figure out how to free themselves. Most humans could easily get themselves out of this situation, but some dogs will not understand it is the leash that's constraining them. A similar error in problem solving happens when humans train dogs with a pinch collar, which causes pain at the moment a dog pulls on the leash. Think about the scenario that is set up when a dog pulls on the leash and experiences pain from pulling on a pinch collar. The dog sees another dog, wants to run towards the other dog to say hello, gets pinched around their neck. The dog feels pain. Now, because of the limited problem-solving abilities the dog has, the dog associates seeing another dog with the pain around their neck. This can cause the dog to develop a fear of other dogs because they do not want that pain around their neck. Now later, the dog starts barking at other dogs or acting aggressive towards other dogs to get the other dogs to stay away. Tragically, some dogs trained with pinch collars spend their entire life thinking the actual sight of the other dog is causing the pain. We have seen some level of dog reactive behavior in 100% of the dogs we have walked that have been trained with the use of a pinch collar. Some level of dog aggression, or even serious dog aggression, is common in many of these cases. Although sometimes it takes months before the aggressive behavior will reveal itself. I was curious why some dogs do not show this aggression until a perfect storm situation arises. So I reached out to my friend, who is a Karen Pryor certified dog training partner, to ask this question. She told me the reason some dogs do not show aggressive behavior, even though they have been subject to aversive training methods, is because they're potentially more resilient than others and better at hiding their emotions. And tragically, the dog feels the same internal fears and experiences the same trauma and stress. Lastly, it's important to note that training with a pinch collar, e-collar, or leash corrections is unnecessary. In all cases, clicker work is more effective. Please help spread awareness of this by encouraging the owner of your company not to accept clients who insist on using a pinch collar or an electronic collar. Instead, we recommend using the pet safe Easy Walk harness.